Hi, and welcome to the very first episode of the Attic Library. I'm Rex Baker. In today's episode, we're going to review a book that has the potential to change your life. It's called Managing Oneself by Peter F. Drucker. So let's get to it. On the other side of this wall back here is my attic. In that attic, I've probably got close to 1,000 books that I've collected over the years. I love books, read most of those, love them. Books open up your mind to new ideas, to new ways of looking at life, and they can impact your life in a very positive way that can change your life. But I've learned this: you learn nothing from the book that you do not read. So go below, click subscribe. Every week I'm going to be coming out with a new book review. So drop your comments in the comment section and let's get started. So the book Managing Oneself by Peter F. Drucker. Here it is, a little yellow book. Pick this up off Amazon. The F stands for Ferdinand. Oh, you really wanted to know that. Drucker is pretty much the father of the modern management movement. Started writing back in the latter part of the 20th century on the subject and was one of the pioneer guys out there writing on this subject. This particular version of Managing Oneself is hardback. Picked it up off Amazon a while back. You can get the Kindle version for 10 or 11 bucks, something like that. So it's a very affordable book. It's short. You can read it basically in an afternoon. That's one of the things I love about this book. The genius of Drucker is that he could take complex management philosophies in the workplace and make them very simple. So a guy like me can read it and understand it. He didn't use a lot of flowery language. Managing Oneself was written back in 2005, I think, and one of the reasons it's so short is it wasn't written as a book. It was written as a magazine article. I believe it was the Harvard Business Review. And he actually wrote a couple of articles for that magazine, and they're both combined in here. But Managing Oneself is the article that gives the title to the book. Great little book, and let's jump into it now and see what it's got. When you look at any book, you always have to consider who is the author, who is writing this book, who is the author writing to, the target audience, and what is the context in which the author is writing, what is the era, what is the time frame in that writing. So with Managing Oneself, Drucker is more or less writing to working professionals, I would say in their 40s or 50s. Professional, kind of a connotation for you work behind a desk. Drucker pioneered the concept of what he calls the knowledge worker. It's someone who gets paid not so much for what they produce, even though there is some production involved, but more so they get paid for the knowledge they bring to the organization and the value that knowledge has. So when you get Managing Oneself, it's a book written toward the end of Drucker's writing career, and he passed away a few years after this. But he takes a lot of his best ideas over the course of his lifetime, and he packs them all into this one little short book that you can read, like I said, in an afternoon. One thing about Drucker is he was one of the first people out here writing on modern management. Now, a lot of other personal development gurus came along after him. Many of those are out on the scene right now. And when you read their stuff, it's really good, some of it. But you can hear the influence of Peter Drucker in what they're saying. So when you buy Drucker and you read his stuff, you're bypassing all these other gurus out there today and going straight to the source for a lot of the inspiration. So you can get this one little book, read it, save yourself a lot of trouble having to read a whole bunch of other people, even though some of those books, we're going to review them later on as well. Drucker starts this book by taking us back in history to an earlier time, maybe even hundreds of years ago, when people didn't change professions. If you grew up on a farm, you farmed when you grew up. If Papa was a blacksmith, you became a blacksmith. If Papa was the baker, you became the baker. Lifespans were shorter back then. People died in their 60s, 50s even, maybe some even earlier than that. So you lived on the land, you lived off the land, and then you died. And that was life. So people didn't face a life where there were going to be changing professions and some of the things that we deal with today. But Drucker takes you back to that and says that's how it used to be. But it's not that way anymore. Now, you can expect to be in the workforce maybe 50 years. If you get your first job in your early 20s and retirement keeps getting pushed back, where now you're basically, people are working into their 70s now. So you can expect to have a job for 50 or so years. And guess what? Things are not going to stay the same during that 50 years. What you did when you were 20, you're probably not going to be doing when you're 70 if you're still working. A lot of us will be or already are. Drucker really picks up in the probably latter part of the 20th century and says that by that time we had stopped just repeating what Dad used to do. Started going out on our own, going to college, get a degree, get a career, get that first job, get married, get some kids, a house, the mortgage, all that sort of thing. And here's what he points out in Managing Oneself, that by the time you're 40, somewhere along in there, you've been doing what you do close to 20 years, and you've gotten pretty good at it. You know how to do it. And then people, oftentimes, according to Drucker, they kind of stall out in their career. Sometimes it's called a midlife crisis. It's where it's like, wow, what am I doing? I'm burned out on my job, all that sort of thing. Drucker says you're not burned out. He says you're bored. And you have to come to grips with that, and you come to grips with it by managing one's self. And he lays out in this little book how to go up some common sense steps on how to go about doing that. Here's what I've observed in life. We start with a lot of energy in our 20s. We're going to change the world. You get that job, you get the spouse, you get some kids, you get a house, all that sort of thing. And you put a lot of energy in building a life. Here's how Drucker lays it out. You get that job and you blink. The next thing you know, you've been doing it for 20 years and you've gotten good at it. You're very proficient at what you do. And he points out that a lot of people at that time, somewhere around 40 or 45, have what is oftentimes called a midlife crisis. The job that you used to love, the career that brought meaning to your life, all of a sudden doesn't bring so much meaning. And you think you're burned out. You think you need to go make all these changes, but what Drucker says basically is you're bored. You've gotten bored with what you've done all these years, and it's no longer a challenge. So what you're really looking for is a new challenge, and that involves managing yourself. Drucker makes a real keen point. Anybody that is effective in life, that produces, learns how to manage themselves. They learn how to take over their life and take control of it and take responsibility. Great producers, Da Vinci, artists like Mozart. I think Napoleon is one he uses for an example. That these kind of people learn the art of managing their own life. So one of the things that is necessary in managing yourself is taking responsibility and realizing that it's not the job of your boss, your supervisor, the organization for which you work, your spouse, your family, the man, the system. You don't blame those groups for being bored in your career when you kind of run out of challenges at midlife. It's easy to do that. My job just doesn't do it for me anymore. Man, if my boss just understood. No, take control yourself. That's one of the key things that Drucker points out, and we can so easily forget. We can pin that responsibility on someone else, but really it's no one else's responsibility. It's your responsibility to take control of your own life. You start by identifying your strengths, those things that you are naturally gifted to do. You just came born good at 2 or 3 things. Now you may develop those skills as life goes on, but there's a couple of things that you are really good at. Pardon the dangling participle there. you don't work toward your weaknesses so much, you work toward your strengths. And in those strengths, you find your motivation, you find most of your life and career accomplishment, you find your challenge, it's something you enjoy doing, and that's what you work on. One thing about working on strengths that a lot of different people who read Drucker have gone on and written books and made mint telling you, hey, you need to work on your strengths, don't work on your weaknesses. And they got the idea from Drucker. So I'm just giving you a little hint right now that he's the man that really came up with that idea first. Now, the reverse of working on your strengths is that you lay off your weaknesses. Basically, this means you don't spend a lot of time and effort as your life goes on working on things to improve things that you're not naturally gifted to do. So how do you know what you're good at? Drucker came up with this idea that he called feedback analysis. Pretty simple. It means you sit down at the first of a year and you write out your expectations for the year. These are the things that I wish to accomplish. Then at the end of the year, you can look back and you write out what you actually did accomplish. And what you find is that oftentimes what you actually did during the year was work on the things in which you are gifted, your strengths. So you look back at that and go, well, I think I'm pretty good at this. Most of us really know down deep inside what we're good at. That's a question I like to ask people sometimes. Hey, what are you good at doing? And I don't know if it's a sense of false modesty, but people, I don't know, I'm not real sure. But yet, I think down deep inside, most of us have a pretty good idea about the things that we do well. A side note here, according to Drucker, don't mistake a weakness with a bad habit. A weakness is just you're not good at math, so don't spend a lot of time trying to become an accountant. But a bad habit, you want to definitely look at those in your feedback analysis. When you look back over your year, you might realize you're not good at follow-up. You make good plans at the beginning of the year, but somewhere along the way, you don't follow up on those plans. So you make a note of that and you build some accountability into your planning so that you have the proper follow-up. That is personally something I've struggled with over the years is follow-up. I can come up with great ideas, but actually following up with them, that's a different story sometime. So you do need to work on those sort of weak areas where it is holding you back. When he says, don't work on your weaknesses, he means areas that you were just not ever going to be really good at. Now let me throw in a Rex observation here. Drucker doesn't get into this kind of stuff as much, but if you got bad habits like you smoke 2 packs a day, your own rolled Camels, you eat bacon 3 times a day, you drink a gallon of hooch every night, definitely, if you're doing those kind of things, you need to make some corrections there, because if you're doing that, chances are you're not going to live through that 50-year career. So Drucker doesn't really get into all that stuff. I'm just throwing that in for free. Drucker uses the analogy of a bulldozer. Talks about the old saying that ideas move mountains. Drucker comes along and says, no, ideas don't move mountains. Bulldozers move mountains. Ideas tell the bulldozer where to go. So your ideas are those things in life that if you can set a goal and you can accomplish that goal, you can do something great. And the hard work comes in the follow-up. That's where the bulldozer aspect comes in. You've got to do the hard work of follow-up, and that comes in under the banner of managing oneself, where you have a goal, you have somewhere you want to go in life, and I would encourage you to think this stuff through. It's real easy to go a year or 2 or 5 or 10 and really not have laid out any concrete goals in your life. So you come up with a great idea. Wow, I can do this and it can change my life. It can change my little world. Then you need to put the ideas behind a bulldozer and let the bulldozer do the hard work. That means following up. A little high quality H2O there to sort of wet the whistle as we're going through all this. If you ever saw the Water Boy, that's a movie that line always needs some high quality H2O. All right, what's next? Drucker puts in writing in Managing Oneself an idea that really opened up my eyes to how people work in the workplace. We've heard the talk sometimes about some people are learn by listening, some people learn by seeing and that sort of thing. Some people like a PowerPoint, some people would rather just have a good lecture, that sort of thing. Some people learn by doing. Drucker takes this concept further and breaks it down even more. He uses an example of someone he knew at some point in the past who ran a company, a successful executive, and this executive would call his team in once a week or so and just talk at them for about 2 hours. He wouldn't listen much, but he would just talk through everything from A to Z, all these different things, and just bounce things out there. And Drucker says this executive was successful, was a person who learned by talking. And he pointed out you need to understand what type of learner you are. Some people learn by writing. They write things out. Some people learn by reading. I'm a reader. If you challenge me with something, say, Rex, you need to find this out, I'm going to go try to read up on it. I'm going to get a book. I'm going to get a couple of online articles, and I'm going to go to town reading. And then after I've read all I need to read, I'm going to come back to you and say, this is what I have found. Some people learn by listening. They listen a lot to other people. They're very analytical. Some people learn by writing things out. So in making it through this 50-year career that Drucker says most of us are going to have, it's really going to be beneficial to understand which type of learner you are and to understand which type of learner the key people in your life are. I know it helps me to understand that some people in the workplace that I might just off the top of my head think, why does this person never shut up? They just talk all the time. But now after reading Drucker, I came away with the understanding that this particular individual learns by talking things through. So while it may appear to us, I'm the kind of person, you tell me something one time, don't tell me again, I think I've got it. But some people talk about the same thing over and over again because by talking through it, they learn it. Other people write it out. This is the person that may say to you, don't tell me anything, just put it in an email and send it to me. Because that's the way they learn. And understanding all that will really help you in managing yourself and in getting along with others and understanding how the workplace works. Are you at your best as an advisor or as a decision maker? Some people make great lifelong advisors. This is a distinction that Drucker talks about in Managing Oneself. There are people that can come along a leader and offer sage, wise advice as to what should be done. But then there are people that are really good at making the right decision. You can be one without being the other. Understanding which you are gifted in, which area. Are you a better team player, someone who can say, well, I think this is the direction we need to go? Or are you a better leader, a decision maker that says, now that we've got the information, we know what we need to do? Drucker says here's where some organizations go wrong. Through the tenure of a strong leader, a strong decision maker, that decision maker will maybe develop a number two person. The number two is an advisor, because you don't need two decision makers necessarily. You need a decision maker and you need an advisor whispering into the decision maker's ear. So when the visionary decision maker retires, sometimes organizations look around and they say, well, here's this person's number two in charge. We can make them the new decision maker because they were wise with their advice over the years, so they obviously understand the organization, so we're going to plug them in. Wrong. It can be a disaster because a person who is a good advisor is not always good at making the decision when it comes time to pull the trigger. And knowing which type of person you are is important in managing yourself. Look at things like, do you work better under stress? Do you work better in a structured environment? Do you work better when given some freedom to be spontaneous? Understanding those things is important for us. Sometimes we don't. Somebody who is spontaneous and gets stuck in a work environment where everything is structured, it bores them to tears. That can be a recipe for a not very fulfilling career. Vice versa. If you get someone who needs that structure, who needs it's 9 to 5, it's the same work every day, they actually enjoy that. But if you put them in a situation where they're expected to be spontaneous and color outside the lines, it might not work out. So understanding which of those types you are is important as well. One key note that Drucker points out: do not take on assignments and projects in areas in which you are not gifted. When you do that, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, potentially for disaster. Stick to the things that you're good at and don't go out trying to do things and volunteering for things. Say, yes, I'll do that, I'm in, if it's an area you're not very good at. Drucker uses an example of an executive who took over a hospital. This was a hospital that was well known nationally and was already a high achieving hospital. But this particular executive came in and said, let's concentrate on our emergency room. Let's have a goal that when a patient comes into the emergency room, they will see a qualified nurse within 12 seconds of being admitted. And that transformed their entire emergency room. And over the next 6 months to a year, it transformed the entire hospital. And within a couple of years, the model of that hospital and how they operated their emergency room had gone nationwide and was transforming hospitals all across the country. That's the power of managing yourself, and then when you get yourself under control and figure out where you're going, taking an organization and other people there with you. One thing to understand is that you have to come to grips with the fact that other people are not like you. So don't insist that they be like you. So one of my pet peeves is other people who think that I need to agree with them on everything. I like to make up my own mind, and I want to challenge you to do that as well. Read the books, do the research, look into different subjects, study for yourself, but then make up your own mind. Don't try to be like someone else. Don't try to think like the in crowd does. That used to be a pretty cool place to be, is being yourself, but nowadays there's a lot of emphasis sometimes, and I don't think that's healthy on conforming yourself to the views of other people. Forget that. I'll make up my own mind what I think, and I challenge you to do the same. Now Drucker wraps things up. He says you have a job where you are paid for what you know and the value that knowledge brings to the workplace. But after some years on the job, you get bored with it, you're looking for a challenge. What do you do then? Simple. You get another job. You develop a second career. And according to Peter F. Drucker, there's 3 ways that we can do that. Number 1, you start a new career. You take another job. You move to the firm across town. You move to another state. You go back to school. You learn something new, and you dive off in a totally new direction. So that's the first thing you can do, is just literally break away and start a new career. The second way is to develop a parallel career. This is maybe the person that at 40, 45 years old, they begin to volunteer for a nonprofit. Let's say you have some legal expertise or some accounting expertise or web development, whatever. You go and volunteer with a nonprofit. Most nonprofits are strapped for resources, not all, but most are, and they don't have enough money to get everything done. So you go work 5-10 hours a week volunteering for this nonprofit in an area where you bring some strength to the table for them. And it can bring fulfillment to your life and sort of recharge your batteries when the paying job is actually maybe not quite as challenging as it used to be. But you can tie in with this nonprofit or some sort of organization like that has a goal, they serve a need in the community that really lights your fire. You feel good about doing it. So you can reinvent that second career that way. Sometimes that is a side hustle where you start a part-time company on the side. I have a friend who makes things, little trinkets and whatnots, and sells them on Etsy and gets a lot of enjoyment out of it. Plus it brings in some income from aside from the day job. The third way is more the social entrepreneur. This is where you break away from one job and you start something totally different. You don't go work for the firm on the other side of town. You go start your own thing. You may start a company. You may start an online business that where you're making a living doing something totally different. Perhaps you start a nonprofit. I've known people do that stopped their career in one thing and started a nonprofit organization. Some may go start a church, go start something that is totally new, and it recharges their batteries at 40, 45, 50 years old, or maybe even older than that. And so that's the third way, where you just break off and you go start something totally new. I personally believe it's not if, more, it's when we all kind of hit that point in our career where we wonder, is this all there is? I really used to enjoy this, but now it's kind of a drag. It's boring. It doesn't challenge me. That is so common. I hear that a lot. I see it in people. I've been through it in my own life. Here's what Drucker says. Don't wait until you're old and burned out to start planning for that day, but start planning for it when you're around 35, knowing that, hey, things are going to change. And here's the thing about it. That 50 years in the workplace, the knowledge that you have in your noggin up here is going to outlive where you currently are on your current job. So you have to manage yourself to put yourself in a position where that knowledge can pay off for you on down the road, even after you've left the job you are in right now. This means around 35, you need to start expanding your horizons. Volunteer for a nonprofit. Get involved in something else. Maybe go take a night class, something that interests you. Maybe it's a hobby, that it's something that you would do for free. You just dig it. So you go out and you start working on that at around 35 years old, and you may say, well, wait a minute, I don't have time for that. I got the kids, I got soccer, I got all that stuff. I understand that. But somewhere around that time of life, you need to start thinking about what else is out there? What else lights my fire? What else gets me going, gets me up in the morning, besides just the 9 to 5, the job? And start working toward developing those interests. Because one day you may be able to take what you know on your current job and plow it into a future passion. I've learned this in my own life, that I'm well into a second career. The first career that I went to college for, I don't do that anymore. But the skills that I learned on that first career, in that first career, I use every day. So the knowledge that we have goes with us from one career to the next part of life. We don't forget that stuff. I appreciate Peter Drucker's honesty. The problem that I have run into with some people out on the personal development circuit is they get up and they say, hey, I went from 0 to 6 figures in 6 months. Buy my book, take my course, come to my seminar, and I will tell you how I did it, so you too can go out and go from 0 to 6 figures in whatever time. Drucker comes along and says, that's not always possible. That's not always preferable. Some people paint a rosy picture of personal development as success coming easy. Drucker comes along and says that we expect everyone to be a success, but that's just not always going to happen. It's not always practical. It's not always even possible. For a lot of folks, according to Drucker, there is at the most an absence of failure. You work through a career that you are mediocre in. You don't rise to the top. You don't make the six figures. Yeah, you got some good knowledge, but you're not the shining star in the company. But what you can do is you can change. You can say, well, I'm sort of stuck in the middle here, but I've got some knowledge and I can go out and put that in a different area and it can really pay off for you. But Drucker is over here being the voice of the realist, that not everybody's going to get rich. We're not all going to become millionaires. We're not all going to become a best-selling author or a top-selling musician or famous. And that's okay. Why is it okay? Because oftentimes success is born out of failure. Think about that best-selling author, that famous musician, the big-time actor. They didn't make the big time on their first song they ever recorded. I've read about numerous authors who the first books they wrote did not sell well. But they keep at it and they learn from their mistakes. And one day they become successful. We look at them and think, wow, that person was just an overnight success. No, they weren't. They put probably 5-10 years of hard work into building their platform. So the Drucker comes along and pretty much rains on the parade of the overnight success that is sometimes painted in our popular culture as being the norm when really it's not. Now a word about being a leader in the sense of a CEO type person. Most people will never be a CEO, but that's okay. Drucker says you really need to look at your own life and consider the concept of taking control of your life like you are a CEO of yourself. I read an article a couple of years ago about a Major League Baseball player who was very successful, drafted out of college, played in the pros, played on a team that won a World Series, and then a few years later his career played out and injuries, that sort of thing. He slowed down, wound up being shown the door. And he said that he had to realize that he was a CEO of a one-person company. And I thought, wow, that's really the way, that's key. We need to all understand, and Drucker backs this up, you, my friend, are the CEO of your life. Don't expect someone else to come in and take it over and tell you what to do to be successful. They'll tell you what to do, but it's not to be a success yourself. It'll be to help them do what they want. But to do what you want, you've got to be a CEO of a one-person company. And that one-person company is you. So that is a look at Managing Oneself by Peter F. Drucker. Now, this particular book, I mentioned this at the beginning, it is actually 2 articles, both written about a year apart for the Harvard Business Review. The second article is called What Makes an Effective Executive? Now, I didn't really get into that one because a lot of people aren't executives, but it's still got some really good stuff. So it's basically 2 for the price of 1. What I love to do with these kind of books is just take them, as I said earlier, and mark them up, underline them. If you can see that, I don't know if you can. There we go. Underline it. And this little guy, you can get him on Amazon for about $10. Give it a read. You can read it in an afternoon. I guarantee it's got good stuff in it. If you read it and put it into effect in your life, it will change your life. So thank you for watching through our first episode of the Attic Library. Go ahead and click subscribe below. We'll be coming out with a different book review each week. Drop your comments down there. Let me know what you think. Realize that this is a first edition, meaning there's still a lot of things about doing YouTube videos I've got to figure out. But I look forward to that journey, and I look forward to seeing you again back here for the next edition of the Attic Library. I'm Rex Baker. Have a great day. Be blessed.